All right, I have 4:30, so we will come to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Pecky did indicate that she will not be present tonight, so I will roll call and take notes in her absence. Mr. Seeger?
Here.
Mr. Ford?
Here.
Mrs. Pecky is absent. Mr. Scheller?
Here.
Mr. Holman? Our list here, I believe Mr. Holman is also absent. Mr. Johnson?
Here.
And Mrs. Johnson is present as well. Dr. Opper, can you verify publication of meeting?
Yes, it was.
Thank you. All right, item A, School District of Manawa response to Waupaca County Public Health Emergency COVID-19 alert issued 10/5/2020 and current rise in School District of Manawa and Waupaca County cases.
So just as a visual, to remind us kind of where we've been and where we are at presently, the 2-week look back at the superintendent's meeting with Waupaca County DHS this morning had a number of 507. So we've now moved off the far right side of the county level chart. And then in terms of the message earlier this week, healthcare facilities are at capacity in our area, and there are not additional healthcare workers available to be brought in to open up more beds, I guess, is how it's put in the medical world. So I was told this morning that loved ones in our county would now, in all likelihood, needing significant medical care would be transported to the Milwaukee area. So we as a district are now in the second row based on the data we have at this time. And then there is the likelihood, depending on how pending tests come back, that we could move even into the third row. There are several tests outstanding at this time. So that's our current situation. So looking at the framework for some guidance, if we're in the second row and we're over 500, we'd be over here. And if we moved into the third row, which is possible, but to confirm has not yet happened, we would also be over here. In both of those instances, the red is called level 4 and calls for a suggested district-wide remote or virtual instruction. And then based on timelines, the concept is that we plan today in order to give ample time for people to make the transition. So the suggestion is that it would start on Monday of next week. So that's what the board is here to talk about, whether or not you would endorse the movement of the district to level 4.
Dr. Opper, if you maybe could address some of the issues right now that we're having as far as subs and staffing. That might be helpful as well.
We, right now this week, have things covered. People, again, Dan and Danny can speak more to how they have been creative about their approaches in filling vacancies, using support staff, substitutes for teachers that are teaching virtually, that sort of thing. So I'm not sure what else we can say other than we're running out of substitutes to tap into. I think we have all of them used that are available to us at this time. And again, I'm not sure creatively what more Dan or Danny are able to do in terms of providing classroom coverages. I do believe they're on, though, if you did have a specific question for them about how they have covered or are covering this week.
So at this time, it's a little more of a substitute problem than it is student numbers?
Both are rising quickly. Staffing, of course, is more the challenge for the in-person instruction. But we would be concerned about slowing the community spread. That was a topic that Jed spoke about quite a bit this morning. And again, that's why he issued the county emergency health alert. Biggest concern being even our local hospitals are full. So people that need hospitalization or care are being sent to Milwaukee now. So that's quite a dramatic switch from what we've heard in the past weeks.
So if we went virtual Monday, what is the suggestion? A week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Do we have any idea?
Usually the suggestion is go 2 weeks and reassess. So we meet every Wednesday because, for example, we started a week later than all the other districts in the county. So we have a couple of districts, New London and Clintonville, that are already at the fully virtual. And so they'll be doing their 2-week assessment next week. But to slow community spread, Jed said, it really takes at least 2 weeks because you think about the virus and the gestational period of the virus. And so to separate and to get things slowed down a little bit, it usually takes a couple of weeks. We'd also hope by then, anyone testing positive by then should have recovered and should be back to school, student or staff member, we would hope by then.
Is there anybody at this time that's quarantined now that would possibly be coming back, say, the beginning of next week?
There are a couple, but I didn't include those in the count. But yes, there would be a couple that, well, one for sure, and the other one I'm not sure about the return date. So I have to be a little vague on that because I don't have return dates in front of me.
Staffing wise, do you think we can continue, or is it that tight that you're afraid that we're going to have to shut down just because we can't staff?
Correct. That is the purpose of the meeting, but we also have involvement of students as well. So the encouragement is to try to slow community spread. So while Jed wanted to make sure schools were doing, he thought, an exemplary job, that the outbreaks are not originating at school. It's what happens in the community is impacting what is occurring at school. But he wanted to make sure you as board members knew that the schools have been vigilant, and he really applauded the schools for everything they were doing.
Maybe another way to kind of look at this is right now we have the ability to plan, so we can make a decision and it would be implemented on Monday. That would give parents more time to be able to find childcare and make arrangements and do some things like that. I think that one of the main concerns would be is that if suddenly we are faced with an incredible amount of absences, or potential exposure in a classroom, we could be forced, because of lack of staffing, to make a move very quickly to virtual. I believe that other districts have done that. And as a parent, I don't know how I would feel about being in a situation where literally from day to day, you do not know if your child is going to be attending virtually or in person. That's pretty hard. It also makes it difficult for our staff members as well, too, to be able to plan.
So if we move virtual, do the teachers still have to report to school, or are they virtual as well?
Yes, they would report, and let me just switch screens here momentarily. And so I can take you to the various plans that were, hold on, I have to get to the correct one first. So these are the student and staff expectations. You want to take a moment to scan those. This is the same document you looked at on Monday.
Okay.
Yeah, no changes.
Is there a consensus of what the teachers think about this, either way, either in person or virtual? Do they have an opinion?
Dan and Danny, I believe, are on. They had an emergency staff meeting after the recognition this afternoon. Mrs. Johnson and I were traveling around delivering gifts, so we did not hear what was discussed.
See, Dan's back on now.
This is Danny.
Okay.
Obviously, the staff is anxious about it. I think based on, I have one staff member right now who is teaching from home, and her students are at school, and I have another staff member that that's teaching from home too. How abruptly that happened, giving them a couple days to at least have some time to adjust and prepare students is a lot easier of an adjustment, especially since we are still teaching kids how to use the devices and the platforms that we're using, Google Meet and Seesaw. The students are still in very early stages in a lot of the classrooms on how to do that. So giving a lot of the anxiety came from, will our students have devices? Which a couple days are going to let us deploy some more devices for kids that don't have them. And then just how exactly does it work? There was some discussion between our staff members that are teaching from home already on what is working and what is not working. So that has been also helpful. This is not what any of the staff members want to do, but part of our discussion too was if we can do a shorter closure to avoid a longer, bigger closure in the future is going to be as good as, like that's a positive in their minds. There's a lot of anxiety though. So giving them a warning now and then a couple days for us to kind of work through what could the issues be, what are the questions that they have. I've already gotten emails and text messages from the staff asking.
I couldn't have said it better myself, Danny. I think you put it in a nutshell perfectly, that I've got staff that are anxious. I've got a couple that are out right now synchronously teaching from home, and they actually were, I'm not going to say the word glad, but they were happy that they had the opportunity to try to do some of this 100% synchronous teaching, so that way they can troubleshoot any issues that they had. So any forewarning that they have to be able to troubleshoot is appreciated. And I agree with your statement that they certainly would prefer to try to shut this thing down faster, so that way we can all get back to in-person learning on a regular basis more quickly.
So as far as, let's say K through 6 or 5th, whatever, how are you guys planning on doing that? Is that going to be as like a Google Meet or like an all day multiple classes, or is that going to be similar to the fall for the younger kids?
For the younger, it will be different than the fall, because it wasn't very successful. There were pockets of success in the fall, because of students' age and family support, I think would be, and maturity of students that were able to kind of buckle down and do things on their own. We feel a very strong urgency to do things differently. It's hard. It's hard for us to think about really young kids being on devices all day, because that's not typically what we think about and what we want. So that was one of the things that we talked through during our meeting today, was about what can we expect our youngest students to be able to do. And it's hard. Like, we're talking, kindergarten, when play is still part of the curriculum. We're still learning through play. How do you learn through play when you're on a device and you're at home? So it is a work in progress. A lot of the teachers expressed wanting to be able to videotape lessons and meet with students, but have the lessons videotaped. I don't know how it will work with having students be gone for part of the day. Like, our teachers also need to eat lunch, so they're not going to be on over lunch and getting kids on and off at a young age. So it will be a work in progress. We will be working up to the stamina of having to be online, because a kindergartner, it's going to struggle being online for 7 hours out of the day, that they're not used to it in an environment that they're not used to. At home, you usually can have more fun, and it's different than what's expected in school. So they're going to have to work up to it. And we talked about the need to have kids held accountable in families, held accountable. I don't think held accountable is really the word, but taking attendance, basically. We need to make sure kids are on, and that they are able to get the questions answered that they do. We can't expect parents to be the teachers, because that's not what they signed up for either. So we're really trying to figure out how can we do this so that students can get the education that they need, families can get the support that they need, and we're not overwhelming anyone, including our staff, because they are overwhelmed. We have, in the last 6 months, have thrown a lot and expected a lot out of our staff with changing, and kind of, it's a moving target. And so we need to make sure that we give them what they need so that we can do things as well as we possibly can. I hope I answered your question. I just felt like I was in an interview where and I couldn't remember what the question was.
Yeah, no, you did. The other issue that I have is there's a lot of, there's some people that are out a little further, including myself. As far as internet issues, do you guys have any suggestions for that? Because I'll basically have 5 kids on.
Yeah, I was going to say, in your house, with the number of devices you have and the bandwidth that I'm guessing you're going to need to have Google Meets. Brian is on. We did do a family survey. I don't think it's perfect. I know that everybody kind of got on and got to it. So teachers are also checking with kids and checking with families as much as they can to make sure, kids have devices, because We do have the intention of being one-to-one as soon as we can. And it's in the process, we're just waiting. It's a waiting game, and there's nothing that we can do to make it go faster. So we have the orders in for one-to-one devices, but we're going to deploy the devices that we have now to people that need them. We also do have some hotspots. I believe we still have some hotspots that can go out that can help with band. And Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the hotspots can help with bandwidth if you need more with already having internet. Am I correct, Brian?
We do have a limited number of Kajit devices. We are ordering more. The survey we sent out had 82 respondents, 82 families responded, which is a good number, but obviously that's not everybody. So that does give us an idea of who needs, either one who doesn't have devices and who has internet issues. And anybody who doesn't have internet at all, we're going to work to get them a hotspot. And for the families that don't have devices, so if a family says, yes, I have a computer or I have a tablet at home for my kid to use, we're not going to ship them a Chromebook. We're going to give the Chromebook to the students that we know need them first, and then make them available after that. For families, we do have some families that have like 6 kids at home, and if that's the case and they have no internet, then we're giving them 2 Kajits, but that's not happening a whole lot. But we are basically, since we're not one-to-one yet, we are basically saying any devices we have, we're going to prioritize putting them where people say they need them. Once we do release that we are closing down, if you guys know it that way, we're expecting more people to say they have more needs, and then we'll address those as they come in.
One of the things that we're doing at the high school is we know for some of our people that have technology challenges or bandwidth is the concept of a technology lounge, where the school would be open in the collaboration spaces or the library media center for the possibility of students to come on in and make appointments at 90-minute increments. It's not intended to be a babysitting service or an all-day type of thing, but if they need to come on in and use the high-speed internet, we would have them come on in. We borrowed this idea from our neighbors in Bondwell, and they had a good response for it. So it's one more thing that we can do to offer our parents and our kids, if they're having connectivity issues, to come on in for short durations of time. And these would not be tutored sessions. They would be supervised. There would be no meals that would be offered. Students would not be allowed to wander around the school. They would be coming in to use the internet.
Well, I understand that that's the opportunity at the middle school, high school level. Danny, is there any contemplation if that's something that could also be possible at the elementary level, or does that get too complicated considering the age of the student?
Yeah, we did look into that a little bit. The age of the student is part of the issue, because then it gets sticky with the whole idea of daycare. And at those ages, those students are typically not home alone and in daycare. So then when is it daycare? Dr. Opper, you might be able to speak a little bit better to the whole idea of daycare, but that isn't really necessarily a viable option at my level.
I think Danny stated it well. And the other challenges, I think at the secondary level, some of the students have the wherewithal to get to school on their own. With the child, the young child, there'd be the matter of somebody dropping them off and someone picking them up, and the level of independence becomes somewhat of an issue. A middle school or high school age student that's can walk to the school for their scheduled appointment or drive themselves, can be much more highly independent, much like they do during a regular school day.
So I also see the additional information part. So some students probably would be coming in to like fulfill IEPs, at risk, that kind of thing.
A very limited number, and our neighboring districts in the county are doing that as well. There are some young people with IEPs or failure to thrive that online learning just is not successful in meeting their needs. And so we want to do a better job than we did last spring in terms of trying to provide for some of those unique situations by making special arrangements. But it would be a very small percentage of the student population. I think New London described it as their 1% to 2% of their total population needed that kind of additional support, even in light of general school closure. And again, that made for a more protected environment for staff because people could be spread out even more than what would be done right now. And then Dan could speak to some of the other classes. Welding is an example where they're getting college credit and they have to put in a certain number of hours in order to get their articulated credit. But they come in, they go alone to their welding booth. They do the work that they need to do and are supervised, and then they head out. So
That's
that would
correct.
be,
Most of those students can provide their own, if not all of them, can provide their own transportation too. They'd come just for that class and then they would leave.
What other questions do we have?
This doesn't have
Dan,
anything to do with- Sorry, go ahead.
I think Dan had one revision to the, I think I'm in the correct one.
That's correct.
One adjustment to the athletic plan.
That's correct. During this time period when the SDM is in synchronous virtual mode of instruction, the fans in the stands policy would be amended to not allow student access or admission for home contests. This would not apply to parents. But it seemed contradictory to try to do our best to mitigate circumstances during the school day, but then allow a certain amount of students to still come on in and into the building for an athletic event, but we're not prohibiting parents.
Mrs. Risky asked the question, would sports continue till Monday? So it may be pertinent to review what the athletic plan is.
By continuing till Monday, we would still be continuing with sports, yes. So, I mean, the Friday night football game would take place. There is a Monday night volleyball game that is scheduled. That would continue. We just would not allow fans from our student population to be in attendance at the game.
After Friday night. So the proposal would be moving to the all virtual on Monday of next week.
Correct.
So Monday is when any new plans would be in effect. So at least not at this time, no changes through the remainder of this week. Again, we always qualify that as long as there's no additional phone call, no additional information that might have changed that, but we believe we've got this week covered.
I don't know if our question was totally answered on the sports end of it. I think what they were looking for is, are they going to continue when we are in virtual if there's no cases?
Yes, as long, I believe what was agreed to on Monday night's conversation, as long as no student athletes on the team are positive and none of the adults that are connected with the team. So that would include coaches, athletic trainer, anybody else that's in close proximity to the kids, any of those adults, not just coaches. And at present, none of those involved are in any way connected with sports.
Okay. Joanne, are we looking for a motion?
If there are no further questions, then yes, we are looking for a motion.
So what we're doing is looking at going to a synchronous class, all virtual model is kind of what we're,
Yes.
To begin on Monday, and then for 2 weeks, and then to be reassessed.
Would that be reassessed before the end of the 2 weeks?
Yes, we, the superintendents in the county and Department of Health Services meet every Wednesday midday.
Just like we're doing now?
Like we're doing now. So right before the 12th, that Wednesday before the 12th, wait a minute. I've got to look at a calendar. I'm sorry.
It would be probably the Wednesday of the 21st, I believe, is what we would look at, because that 2-week period would start the 12th. And were everything okay, we would be back in school then on the 26th, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Then we'd have 2 days to transition back and start up again. So there's always the intent. So there's time to call these meetings, get everybody notified, and start making the shift. So on the 21st, you'd either be extending or you'd be resuming the in-person plan that we had left. So you'd probably just reverse and go back to what we're currently doing.
well, Bruce Scheller, I make a motion that we move into the synchronous class school all virtual model on Monday. I'd like to add the date to that, but what day is Monday?
October 12th through October 23rd.
October 12th through October 23rd.
Do we need to have anything in that motion about revisiting the topic on October 21st?
I think it would be helpful.
And we will be revisiting it on October 21st to approve whether we go back into our normal way of teaching before or continue with the synchronous.
Give me just a moment. I'm writing notes here for our formal minutes.
Make it look better than I made it sound?
I can. How does this sound? A motion to move into synchronous all virtual instructional model on Monday, October 12th, 2020 through October 23rd, 2020. The topic will be revisited October 21st, 2020 to determine which mode of instruction will continue. That capture it?
Yes.
I have a motion by Mr. Scheller. Do I have a second?
Russ Johnson, I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Johnson. Any further discussion? Okay, we will proceed then by a roll call vote. Mr. Seeger,
Aye.
Mr. Forbes,
Aye.
Mrs. Petke is absent. Mr. Scheller,
Aye.
Mr. Holman is absent. Mr. Johnson,
Aye.
and it is an aye from Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion carries on a roll call vote with Holman and Petke absent. Item B, temporary staffing options. Dr. Upper.
This is a very rough memo, so forgive me. Time was very challenging today. But at a high level, there is the possibility that depending on the circumstances during the closure of school buildings and going to virtual instruction, that we may not have the normal amount of work for all support staff. So there are several avenues that could be explored. And I spoke with Mr. Renning about this today in terms of what other districts are doing. So reduction in hours would be one, that you'd do your normal work, but if you're in direct service with students and those students aren't at school, it could be a reduction in hours. Another scenario might be asking an employee to do other assigned work. We'll just pull out an example. Let's say we were short a person in food service, and one of the paras didn't have all their students to work with. They might be asked to assist in the kitchen on a short-term basis. And the third is furlough. Furlough being different than layoff. Layoff is no pay and no benefits. In the furlough arrangement, there is a continuation of the benefits. In a furlough, you are eligible for unemployment. And under Act 185, eligible employees that are using unemployment insurance benefits, that would be at no cost to the district through that federal program through the end of December 2020. So in an earlier meeting today with the administrative team, Dan and Danny in particular are taking a look at who would be in school, based on some of those extenuating circumstances we talked about earlier, other needs that we might have. And then they will put together, I think, something in the form of a simple table or spreadsheet. If there would be any reduction in hours, any transfer of job assignments or furloughs, and we would need the board to approve those. So if there should be any of those, we would be calling another short meeting probably on Monday to get your approval for that. And again, this would be, in this instance, temporary. We'd be talking about the 2 weeks, same 2 weeks with the dates October 12th through the 23rd initially. And this is something we've not talked about, and that's why it's on tonight's agenda, so you have time to reflect on it and weigh in on your thoughts about that, should we need to go that direction. I do believe Carmen is on if you have any financially related questions.
I don't know, to me, it looks like the furlough would make the most sense for the employees and for us. They didn't get the feeling the government is kicking in kind of on that because of the COVID stuff. So that sounds like a good idea with people.
So are we asking for a decision to be made tonight, or are we asking to reflect upon it and make that determination later?
This is just for your initial first review and to give you time to reflect on it. We'd have to call a special meeting early next week, potentially as early as Monday, if Dan or Danny would suggest that we're going to make any changes. It's already permitted in the MOUs that our staff have, but the board does have to approve if we're going to be changing anybody's conditions of work.
Do we need to meet on Monday then, or can we do something see how the first couple of days go, or we have to make that decision before they actually cut hours and stuff like that?
We wouldn't change anyone's work arrangement until after it was board approved.
Okay. I'm still thinking
again,
almost need a couple days anyway, right?
Well, and like I
See,
said, we had an emergency administrative meeting earlier today. Dan and Danny have had no opportunity to think about what their needs are, to take a look at based on who's in school and staffing, for example, the tech lounges and things like that. They need a little time to work out the details. I don't want them to hurry into a decision. I want them to have the time they need. So my request to them was to have something ready on Monday.
Okay.
All right, anything additional on that particular topic? All right, so do we need to set up follow-up meetings? Okay, actually, we just have a question that is coming in from Mrs. Risky. Could you explain the sports part of the shutdown?
I think for that, Mr. Wolfgram, are you still on?
Absolutely.
All right, I'll put it back up on the screen and then
I'll try to take it from the top again, Ms. Risky. Sports will continue as they have. They are not being shut down unless we have a student that is directly in contact or with team members, or if there's a staff person directly associated coaching with the sport. Those are the two stipulations that the board has put forth. They are still going to continue to compete. We are not looking to allow students to participate in home events, but we would basically continue as we have been, as if school were in session in person.
now, Mr. Woe did again commend our athletic teams. For example, he said doing the strategic things that we've been doing, the conditioning, kids are in cohort groups when they're training to the degree they can be. He said if you can break up one of the days and do a virtual review of game film and things of that sort of thing, if you can use some of those to kind of strategically break up exposures, that can be beneficial. And I know our coaches have already been thinking about that and have been doing that all along. So they put together for each of the sports a very detailed plan of how they were trying to keep kids in smaller groups and work them through that way. And that seems to be successful to this point.
So just to confirm here, Friday night's football game, the students are allowed at yet Friday night?
That's correct.
That is correct.
Or the
And
select students, right?
That's correct.
Do we have any additional questions? Dr. Upper, did you wish to set up a follow-up meeting right away, or do you wish to hold board members later?
I was just looking at Monday, if we were to do, ironically, I have a doctor's appointment after school on Monday. I'm thinking that might get canceled in light of everything. Not by me, I'm guessing they probably aren't going to take non-emergency patients. If we tentatively did something a bit later, like 6:30. And again, we'd probably only have the one topic. It should be relatively focused and brief.
How does that work for everybody?
Well, for me, Bruce Scheller, 6:30 is a good time.
Russ Johnson, I think it's a good time.
Stan Forbes, good.
I'm good with it too.
Okay. All right, so let's plan then Monday at 6:30, Monday at 6:30 if need be. Another thing that I think that we probably should mention is food for students. We had touched on it briefly the other night, Dr. Upper, about the fact that should be virtual, that there still would be the option of students receiving breakfast and lunch. However, it would not be delivered as it were in the spring when we shut down. So if you maybe want to touch on that, and then maybe any other relative topics that you can think of. You know, is there going to be transportation for kids that still need to go to school, or how are we going to meet some of those needs?
If Mrs. O'Brien is on, both food service and transportation are two of her responsibilities. But I can chime in. Here she is.
I knew you were going to call on me. So with the food service, as this has, evolved moderately quickly today, we have some ideas about what's going to happen, but I don't have anything set in stone, although I will have a plan after I speak with Mrs. Zeese today after this meeting. So my thought is that we would offer pickup for food, probably between, I'm thinking like between maybe 10 in the morning and noon, and then another pickup time, maybe from 2 in the afternoon until 4. That would be dependent upon staffing, although I'm pretty sure we would have people available to staff that pickup. The ordering system would be the same. You would go on to our website where there are Google Forms for each week, and you would order, your lunches or your breakfast items. as we're thinking, potentially pick up to 2 to 3 days worth of food. I know that there is some rules with DPI with that. I believe though that you can pick up to 3 days worth of food. So we're going to be looking into that and finalizing those ideas or those plans as to how we'll get food to families, or how families can pick up food from us. The idea of transportation, there are, I would say less than 40. If I were to, I didn't count them exactly, but somewhere between, I'd say maybe around 30 kids that we feel still need to come to school to receive services. And I spoke with Jacob from Cobeson today, and we looked at that. He said that he thought that we would be able to run 2 routes, just looking at the kids' names on the sheet that I sent him. I'm thinking, one north route, one south route, and to get kids to and from school. As far as our midday route, we only have a few of our 4K students. I believe there's 4 of them altogether that would require that we would, want to come in. And so we would look at providing transportation home for those 3 to 4 students, using our school van to do that. So yes, we're looking at drastically reducing our bus routes during the shutdown time.
Dr. Upper, can you also maybe address when and how parents are going to receive notification of this so that we can make sure that they're allowed as much time as possible?
So I've worked on a draft of a letter that is not yet quite finished, but it will be finished this evening and will go out as a Skylert attachment. And I try to, I've included a lot of people in, I use usually the total contact list. So it probably is also going to child care providers, the families of St. Paul's students, step volunteers, to just try to communicate as widely as possible with the largest number of people. And then I usually send it on to what's happening in Manawa, Chamber of Commerce, the mayor, the chief, the fire chief, and Sheriff Wills. Again, because those public officials can often disseminate information among others as well in a quick and efficient manner.
Does St. Paul's have to go virtual also, or do they have the option?
That would be their own decision, but I have visited a couple times with Mr. Elmhorst, and so I'll also be contacting him to let him know what you've decided to see what their intent is. I do believe I may have seen their board president on this meeting a little bit earlier. I'm not 100% sure about that.
And in the event that they do still decide to continue, how is busing impacted for them?
Busing would still be provided for them if they wish to continue. But again, there are a relatively small number of students that use busing. So yeah, Jacob would have to be provided those names and would work routes out accordingly if that were the case.
Dan or Danny, can you think of any other issue which we may not have covered, which might be germane to this and to getting the word out?
God, I think we've got it covered. Dr. Opper usually does a really good job with making sure that all the different avenues are covered, as far as whether it's the cable access channel, press releases, all those different. I think she's got it. a running hit list, don't you, Dr. Opera, of everything that needs to go out. It's as far as advertising.
We try.
At the elementary level, there are a few things that we are going to be sending out for the online learning, like Google logins, because some of our littles don't do that now. So that's something that I've already been getting emails from staff, and we'll be sending that home with students probably Friday, but maybe tomorrow.
And it is Brian, so just to add to that, there's going to be some information that goes out in terms of how to. It's kind of like support for parents. And there's also going to be a lot of support to help the parents. So like already with the kindergartners that are home this week, we did a lot of online support, like remotely walking them through things and phone support and email support. So we'll be doing that as well to get them information and then support them once they have it.
Mrs. Johnson, a question did come into the chat box. You're muted.
Just was going to say, helps if I turn on my microphone. Sorry about that, guys. Mrs. Risky did ask the question. I have to voice my opinion about sports. If we cannot have our kids in a classroom, how can we have them in sports with close contact?
Dan, would you like to field the conversations that you've had with athletic directors, people across the CWC, our own?
I know that in our conversations with the CWC principals, I had an impromptu meeting the other day with Iola, Marion, Waiwiga. I believe they are all feeling, we're all feeling conflicted. We understand both sides of the needs. One of the things that we've noticed with our kiddos is that right now our student population in the athletic programs has not been impacted. We know that the social emotional learning side of having those kids continue to stay focused and have meaning in their days is as important to keep them engaged in the classroom. The same thing if it were forensics, we would do the same thing if it were music. All those types of activities, we are looking to try to continue as best we can to keep our students mentally fresh and healthy and try to be engaged in their learning. So I know that across the CWC, the voices are loud to try to support those programs so our kids can stay engaged.
Next question. Yep. Oh, you're going to take it right away. Thank you, Dan.
Our team, absolutely. Nancy is I think doing a great job. I know that last year at the last minute, she had to put together an all virtual conference 2 days before we shut down in March. She's used to this platform. I've talked with her today as far as making sure that kids all have their art supplies for this 2-week hiatus that we're going to be on. So she's very forward thinking and she's very conscientious about wanting to make sure that her kiddos stay engaged in the arts as well as athletics. And I certainly would advocate for all of our programs. Whatever we can do to support our kids to stay engaged, let's do it.
On that note, I did also see that part of the middle school, high school plan is, for example, that music lessons will continue on a student-by-student basis, much in the same way that our kids will be allowed in to do welding or some of the other tech items. So it certainly is not specific to sports. I mean, it's specific to any of our programs. It just has to be done in a slightly more modified manner. Is that correct?
That'd be correct. Safety and security is obviously the most important factor when trying to make these decisions, but we also know that if we can do some things safely and we've demonstrated that we've been able to do that, then let's continue to keep our students engaged and give them the opportunities to continue learning.
Thank you, Mr. Wolfgram. Were there any additional questions? Okay, next meeting dates, October 14th is going to be Policy and Human Resources at 5 o'clock virtually. 19th is Finance Committee, 5:30 virtually. 19th is also regular board meeting, 7 o'clock. October 26th is the annual district meeting, 7 p.m. That will be a hybrid model. October 27th is a Board of Education retreat at 5:30. November 10th, curriculum at 6. November 16th, Board of Education at 7. I would be then looking for a motion to adjourn, please.
Bruce Scheller, I so move.
I have a motion by Mr. Scheller. Do I have a second?
Stan Forbes, second.
Second by Mr. Forbes. Any discussion? We will commence by a roll call vote.
Aye.
Mr. Seeger? Mr. Forbes?
Aye.
Mr. Holman is absent. Mrs. Pecky is absent. Mr. Scheller?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Sorry, aye.
There's an aye from Mrs. Johnson as well. Motion to adjourn carries at 5:31 p.m. Board members, if I can have you stay on for a moment, and Dr. Opper, if I could have you, as we are adjourned, if you would like to cease the recording.